"I value your critical thinking," Ryan tells him, "but we need to balance identification of problems with creation of solutions. The team is becoming afraid to bring new ideas because they expect immediate criticism." This conversation doesn't immediately change Devon's approach, but it establishes a boundary around how negativity can express itself in their working relationship. Ryan also begins spending more one-on-one time with his other partner, Sophia, whose pragmatic optimism helps balance his perspective. When challenges arise, Sophia acknowledges them realistically but always pivots to "what can we do about this?" rather than dwelling on doom scenarios. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." By intentionally exposing himself more to Sophia's problem-solving mindset and creating boundaries around Devon's catastrophizing, Ryan gradually dyes his thinking with more constructive colors. Cultivating a positive mental ecosystem doesn't mean avoiding all negativity. Life inevitably includes challenges, disappointments, and legitimate concerns. Rather, it means creating an environment that helps you respond to these realities in constructive ways instead of spiraling into rumination or despair. Consider the media you consume. News outlets and social media algorithms often prioritize alarming, outrage-inducing content because it drives engagement. While staying informed is important, constant exposure to catastrophic or divisive content shapes your perception of reality, often making the world seem more dangerous and hopeless than it actually is. Rachel, 51, a financial analyst in Denver, establishes news boundaries. She stays informed through a daily 30-minute review of balanced sources rather than constant alerts and feeds. She's not less informed, but her information diet is more nutritious and balanced, supporting mental clarity rather than anxiety. The physical spaces we inhabit can either deplete or replenish our mental energy. Even small changes can shift the atmosphere, opening blinds to let in natural light, introducing plants, reducing clutter, or creating a dedicated space for activities that nurture your mind, reading, meditation, or creative pursuits. Seneca advised, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you." This doesn't mean abandoning friends going through difficult times or surrounding yourself only with cheerleaders who never challenge you. Rather, it suggests being intentional about who influences your thinking and perspective. For Ryan, this means joining a mastermind group of fellow entrepreneurs who share challenges honestly while maintaining a growth mindset. These monthly meetings provide a reality check against both his insecurities and the polished narratives on social media. The group celebrates successes, troubleshoots problems, and reminds each other that behind every overnight success are years of unseen effort and setbacks. 6 months after beginning to consciously cultivate his mental ecosystem, Ryan's thinking has noticeably shifted. He still faces business challenges and occasional comparison traps, but his baseline perspective is more grounded and constructive. By curating his digital consumption, reshaping his physical workspace, and being intentional about his social influences, he's created an environment that supports resilience rather than rumination. The power of the environment doesn't eliminate personal responsibility for our thoughts. Rather, it acknowledges that willpower alone is often insufficient for lasting mental change. By strategically adjusting the contexts that shape our thinking, we make it easier for our minds to develop healthier default patterns, creating an ecosystem where positivity can naturally flourish. Lesson 5. Stoic Action, Moving Through Negativity. Megan Thompson, 43, sits at her desk in downtown Philadelphia, staring at the blinking cursor on her screen. As a project manager for a major healthcare system, she's responsible for implementing a new patient portal, a high-visibility initiative with tight deadlines and multiple stakeholders. The project plan is due to executives tomorrow, but Megan hasn't been able to start it. It's not that she doesn't know what to do. With 15 years of experience, she's more than capable. But each time she begins, a wave of anxiety washes over her. This has to be perfect. If there's a single flaw in the plan, the whole project could fail. People's healthcare access depends on this. I need to think it through more completely. Hours pass. The cursor keeps blinking. The plan remains unwritten. Megan is trapped in a common cycle. Perfectionism leads to procrastination, which increases anxiety, which reinforces perfectionism. Her negative thoughts create paralysis. But there's a way out of the cycle, and it starts with a fundamental Stoic principle: action. Marcus Aurelius expressed this clearly when he wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." This straightforward directive cuts through the mental clutter that often keeps us stuck. Instead of endlessly analyzing, worrying, or planning, Stoicism emphasizes doing, taking concrete steps forward, however imperfect or small they might be. Negative thinking thrives in inaction. When we sit idle, our minds have time to replay fears, doubts, and past mistakes on an endless loop. One of the most powerful ways to disrupt this cycle is to take deliberate, purposeful action. Action shifts your focus from worrying about what could go wrong to working on what you can make right. As Epictetus advised, don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. This wisdom applies perfectly to overcoming negative thinking. We can't think our way out of negative thought patterns. We must act our way out by creating new experiences that challenge our limiting beliefs. For Megan, the breakthrough comes when she remembers advice from a mentor: start with the bad version. Rather than aiming for perfection from the outset, she gives herself permission to create a rough draft, something to improve upon rather than a finished product. This simple shift breaks the spell of paralysis. Within minutes, she's outlining key project phases. The plan isn't perfect, but it exists, and existing is the first requirement of improvement. Stoic action begins with focusing on what's within your control. Many negative thoughts stem from obsessing over things we can't change, other people's opinions, past mistakes, or unpredictable outcomes. When we redirect our energy toward actions within our sphere of influence, we regain a sense of agency and purpose. Consider Daniel, 46, a high school English teacher in Austin who becomes fixated on a negative performance review from his principal. For days, he ruminates on the criticism, questioning his teaching ability and imagining worst-case scenarios about his career. The turning point comes when he asks himself, what aspects of this situation can I control? He can't change the review itself or his principal's perspective, but he can implement specific teaching strategies to address the feedback and document his improvement. By focusing on these actionable steps rather than the unchangeable review, he transforms anxious rumination into productive progress. Another key to Stoic action is breaking down overwhelming tasks into smaller, manageable steps. When faced with a complex challenge, our minds often catastrophize, seeing the task as impossibly difficult. This perception triggers avoidance, which only increases anxiety and negative self-talk. Epictetus offered timeless advice on this approach: make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. By identifying the smallest possible action that moves us forward and focusing exclusively on that step, we create momentum that carries us through larger challenges. For Megan, this means dividing her project plan into 5 distinct sections and committing to complete just the first section in her initial work session. Once that's done, she moves to the second, then the third. Each completed section builds confidence that erodes her negative thoughts about inadequacy and potential failure. A third aspect of Stoic action is aligning what you do with your core values. When our actions reflect what matters most to us, they naturally generate a sense of meaning and purpose that counteracts negative thinking. As Seneca noted, he who is brave is free. Freedom from mental suffering comes not from avoiding challenges, but from facing them in a way that honors our deepest principles. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself of this daily, writing at dawn. When you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. What do I have to complain of if I'm going to do what I was born for, the things I was brought into the world to do? Rachel, 52, a nonprofit director in Baltimore, applies this wisdom when fundraising anxiety threatens to overwhelm her. Rather than focusing on the potential for rejection or failure, she reconnects with the organization's mission, providing arts education to underserved communities. By grounding her actions in this purpose, the negative thoughts about possible rejection lose their power. Whether a particular donor says yes or no becomes less important than the consistent effort aligned with her values. Taking action also builds evidence that contradicts negative beliefs. Many of our self-limiting thoughts persist because we haven't challenged them with contrary experiences. Each time we face a fear and survive, complete a task we thought was beyond us, or connect with someone despite social anxiety, we create concrete evidence against our negative assumptions. Carl, 38, a software developer in Seattle, spent years believing he couldn't speak effectively in public. This belief limited his career advancement and reinforced negative self-perception. The shift began when he joined a small presentation skills group and committed to giving one 3-minute talk each month. Each successful presentation, however modest, created evidence against his belief in his incompetence. Within a year, he was confidently leading team presentations to clients, not because his fear disappeared, but because he acted despite it. Stoic action doesn't mean you'll eliminate all obstacles or avoid all mistakes. What it does mean is that you'll move forward despite them. The Stoics believe that life's challenges aren't barriers to growth but opportunities for it. Every time you take action in the face of negativity, you prove to yourself that negative thoughts don't have to define your capabilities or limit your choices. As Megan completes her project plan, imperfect but thoughtful and on time, she realizes something important. The negative thoughts didn't disappear during the process. The voice that said, "This won't be good enough," remained present. But action changed her relationship to that voice. Instead of being paralyzed by it, she worked alongside it. The voice became background noise rather than a commanding presence. This is the essence of Stoic action, not the absence of negative thoughts, but the decision to act despite them. As Marcus Aurelius wisely observed, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. The very challenges that seem to block our path can become the path itself when approached with a mindset of purposeful action. By focusing on what's within your control, breaking tasks into manageable steps, aligning actions with values, and building evidence against limiting beliefs, you create momentum that transforms how you relate to negative thinking. You shift from passive victim to active participant in your life, and in that shift lies freedom. The next time negative thoughts threaten to immobilize you, remember, you don't have to wait until you feel confident or certain to begin. In fact, action usually precedes these feelings rather than following them. As the Stoics knew, we don't primarily think our way into new ways of acting, we act our way into new ways of thinking. Lesson 6, Words as Tools, Reshaping Your Mental Landscape. Eliza Montgomery, 36, sits in her Los Angeles apartment, surrounded by half-finished manuscripts. As a writer who's published several moderately successful novels, she should be working on her latest book, due to her publisher in 3 months. Instead, she's frozen, her creativity paralyzed by an internal dialogue that has grown increasingly toxic. This is garbage, she tells herself, staring at yesterday's work. Nobody's going to connect with these characters. My last book was a fluke. Everyone's going to realize I'm a fraud. The words echo in her mind, forming a barrier between her and the story she wants to tell. What Eliza hasn't fully recognized is the immense power of words, not just the ones she writes for others, but the ones she speaks to herself. The language we use, both in our internal dialogue and in our conversations with others, carries remarkable power. Words aren't simply descriptions of reality, they actively shape how we perceive and experience the world. When negative language dominates our thoughts, it reinforces doubt and fear, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy that limits our potential. Marcus Aurelius understood this influence when he wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind." This applies not only to what we think, but how we express those thoughts. Words aren't merely reflections of our mental state, they're tools that can transform it. The power of words begins with our inner dialogue, that constant stream of thoughts running through our minds. Pay attention to how you talk to yourself when facing challenges. Do you use phrases like, "I can't handle this," or "I always mess things up"? These statements may seem like simple observations, but they're actually powerful programming that shapes your self-perception and capabilities. Eliza's breakthrough begins during a morning walk along Venice Beach. Frustrated by her creative block, she calls her friend Maya, a psychologist. After listening to Eliza's struggles, Maya asks a simple but profound question: would you ever talk to a friend the way you talk to yourself? The question stops Eliza in her tracks. Of course she wouldn't. She'd never tell a fellow writer their work was garbage or that their success was just luck. She'd be encouraging, thoughtful, and constructive, pointing out strengths while gently suggesting improvements. Yet somehow she's normalized a level of self-directed cruelty she'd never inflict on another person. This realization marks the beginning of Eliza's journey toward transforming her inner language. She starts by simply noticing her verbal patterns without judgment. When she catches herself thinking, "This is garbage," she doesn't criticize herself for the negative thought that would only add another layer of negative self-talk. Instead, she acknowledges it. "I notice I'm being harshly critical right now." This small shift from identification with thoughts to observation of them creates crucial space between Eliza and her inner dialogue. Her words become objects she can examine rather than truths she must accept. Epictetus taught, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." Our words are among the few things truly within our control. We can't always choose our circumstances, but we can choose how we frame them through language. Next, Eliza begins consciously reframing her internal statements. When "this is garbage" arises, she deliberately shifts to "this is a first draft, and first drafts aren't meant to be perfect." When "I'm a fraud" surfaces, she replaces it with "I'm a writer who, like all writers, has moments of doubt and moments of clarity." These reframings aren't about denying challenges or forcing toxic positivity. Eliza doesn't tell herself, "This is brilliant," when she doesn't believe it. Instead, she chooses language that's both honest and constructive, words that acknowledge reality while creating space for growth rather than shutting it down. The words we speak aloud to others are equally powerful. Mark, a 47-year-old marketing director in Portland, notices how differently his team meetings feel when he consciously shifts his language. Rather than saying, "The campaign failed to meet expectations," he says, "We learned valuable insights about what resonates with our audience." Same reality, different framing, and dramatically different impact on his team's motivation and creativity. Seneca advised, "Associate with people who make you better." Our words play a crucial role in whether we lift others up or drag them down. When we consistently use language that focuses on problems without solutions, past mistakes without lessons, or fears without possibilities, we become the kind of presence that depletes rather than energizes those around us. One powerful tool for transforming your verbal landscape is the practice of affirmations, intentional positive statements that help reprogram mental patterns. While sometimes dismissed as simplistic, research in cognitive psychology and neuroscience supports their effectiveness when used properly. For Eliza, this doesn't mean generic statements like, "I am successful." Such broad affirmations often trigger internal resistance when they don't match our current self-perception. Instead, she creates specific, believable affirmations like, "I've overcome creative challenges before and I have the tools to do it again," or "I'm committed to the process of writing, not just the outcome." These statements feel true enough to accept while still gently stretching her self-concept in a positive direction. Over time, as she repeats them daily, especially before sitting down to write, they begin to reshape her default thinking patterns. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Our actions may be impeded by them, but there can be no impeding our intentions or our dispositions, because we can accommodate and adapt." This adaptive capacity begins with the words we use to frame our experiences. By intentionally choosing language that empowers rather than limits us, we create mental pathways that lead to resilience and growth. Language also shapes how we perceive time and possibility. Notice how often negative thinking employs absolute terms. "I'll never succeed," "Things always go wrong," "I'm always overlooked." These sweeping generalizations collapse time, erasing both past successes and future possibilities. By replacing them with more accurate temporal language, "I'm facing a challenge right now, this particular project didn't go as planned," we recognize the transient nature of difficulties. After a particularly difficult day when no words seem to flow, Eliza catches herself thinking, "I'll never finish this book." She consciously rewrites this thought, "I'm struggling with this chapter today. Tomorrow may be different." This simple adjustment reopens the future, making space for possibility where absolutist language had closed it off. Another powerful linguistic tool is replacing passive language with active constructions. Compare, "I was devastated by the criticism," with, "I responded to the criticism with disappointment." The first phrasing positions you as a passive recipient of emotional impact. The second acknowledges your agency in how you process experiences. This subtle shift reinforces your capacity to choose your responses rather than being at the mercy of external events. 3 weeks into her conscious language practice, Eliza notices significant changes. Her writing sessions feel different, not always easier, but less fraught with existential dread. When negative thoughts arise, she has tools to address them rather than being overwhelmed. The internal dialogue hasn't disappeared, but it's become more balanced, more supportive, more conducive to creativity. Words have the power to create worlds, both on the page and in our minds. By becoming intentional about the language we use, we can transform limiting narratives into expansive ones, harsh self-criticism into constructive feedback, and pessimistic forecasts into open possibilities. As Eliza returns to her manuscript with renewed focus, she keeps a quote from Marcus Aurelius nearby, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." Through her conscious choice of words, both internal and external, she's gradually changing the color with which her mind is dyed, from the dark hues of fear and self-doubt to the clearer, brighter tones of possibility and resilience. Your words are not just descriptions of your reality, they are architects of it. Choose them wisely and watch as they begin to build a mental landscape that supports rather than undermines your deepest aspirations. Lesson 7. Unbreakable, Building Emotional Resilience. Dr. Alicia Jackson, 41, steps out of Dallas Presbyterian Hospital into the scorching Texas heat, pulling off her mask as the automatic doors close behind her. As a critical care nurse who became a department director during the pandemic, the past few years have tested her limits in ways she never imagined. Today, after a 12-hour shift dealing with staffing shortages, administrative demands, and a patient coding, she feels the weight of it all pressing down on her. In her car, she rests her forehead against the steering wheel and allows herself a moment to acknowledge the truth she's burning out. The emotional toll of leadership during crisis, the relentless pressure to remain strong for her team, the accumulation of hundreds of difficult days, it's catching up with her. Yet tomorrow she'll return. The question isn't whether she'll face more challenges, but how she'll respond when they inevitably arise. Life is unpredictable. No matter how carefully we plan or prepare, challenges, setbacks, and disappointments are guaranteed. The question isn't if you'll face difficulties, it's how you'll respond when they arise. Emotional resilience is the ability to adapt and thrive despite adversity, and it's one of the most powerful tools for overcoming negative thinking. Marcus Aurelius understood this well, writing in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This insight forms the foundation of resilience from a Stoic perspective. We cannot control much of what happens to us, but we can develop the inner resources to respond effectively rather than being overwhelmed. Resilience isn't about avoiding pain or pretending everything is fine. It's not toxic positivity or emotional suppression. Rather, it's about developing the capacity to experience difficult emotions without being defined by them, to bend without breaking, to acknowledge pain without being consumed by it. Dr. William Rodriguez, 45, a psychologist specializing in trauma recovery, explains resilience is commonly misunderstood. It's not about toughening up or avoiding negative feelings. In fact, acknowledging difficult emotions is essential to processing them constructively. Resilience is the ability to feel deeply while maintaining your core functionality and sense of self. For Alicia, building resilience begins with acceptance, recognizing that some aspects of her situation are beyond her control. She can't eliminate staffing shortages nationwide or instantly fix systemic healthcare issues. When she focuses on these uncontrollable factors, her frustration and sense of inadequacy intensify. But when she redirects her energy toward what she can influence, her leadership approach, self-care practices, communication with her team, she regains a sense of agency that is essential to resilience. Epictetus taught this principle clearly: make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. This distinction between what we can and cannot control is the foundation upon which emotional resilience is built. By focusing our energy on our sphere of influence rather than wasting it on factors beyond our control, we develop the capacity to navigate challenges effectively. Another key to resilience is reframing setbacks as opportunities for growth. When something difficult happens, resilient people don't deny the pain or challenge, but they actively search for possibilities within it. This doesn't mean every hardship is a blessing in disguise. Rather, it means that even in painful circumstances, growth and learning remain possible. Marcus Aurelius articulated this perspective when he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In modern terms, we might say that obstacles aren't just barriers, they're also doorways to new capabilities, insights, and strengths. When Adam, 53, a finance executive in Chicago, unexpectedly lost his position after a company merger, his first response was devastation. His identity and sense of security were deeply tied to his role. But after the initial shock, he began asking different questions. What skills have I developed that I couldn't have gained elsewhere? What possibilities might exist now that weren't available before? How might this challenge reveal strengths I didn't know I had? This reframing didn't eliminate the real difficulties of job loss, but it transformed a purely negative experience into one with potential for growth. Within 6 months, Adam had launched a consulting practice that offered greater flexibility and ultimately more satisfaction than his previous position. Resilience also requires self-compassion, treating ourselves with the same kindness we would offer a friend facing difficulty. Many of us are unconsciously harder on ourselves than on anyone else, mentally berating ourselves for weaknesses or mistakes we would readily forgive in others. This harsh self-criticism doesn't motivate improvement, rather, it depletes the emotional resources needed for resilience. Seneca advised, if you would judge, investigate. Applied to ourselves, this means examining our struggles with curiosity rather than condemnation. When Alicia notices she's being self-critical about not managing her stress better, she pauses and asks, would I judge a colleague this harshly for being human? What would I say to a friend facing similar challenges? This shift from self-judgment to self-compassion doesn't lower standards, it creates the emotional safety needed to acknowledge mistakes, learn from them, and move forward effectively. Research consistently shows that self-compassion is associated with greater emotional resilience and decreased negative thinking. A powerful tool for building resilience is mindfulness, the practice of present-moment awareness without judgment. When we're mindful, we create space between stimulus and response, between what happens and how we react to it. This space allows us to choose our responses rather than being driven by automatic reactions. For instance, when Alicia feels overwhelmed by a new administrative demand, she practices a brief mindfulness technique, 3 conscious breaths, noting physical sensations in her body and mentally labeling her emotions, feeling frustrated, feeling anxious. This simple practice doesn't change the external situation, but it prevents her from being hijacked by her initial emotional reaction, allowing her to respond more effectively. Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Mindfulness creates the pause that makes chosen reactions possible. Building resilience also involves developing a supportive community. The Stoics valued self-reliance but also recognized the importance of meaningful human connection. Research confirms that social support is one of the strongest predictors of resilience during challenging times. For Alicia, this means being vulnerable with trusted colleagues about her struggles rather than maintaining a facade of perfect strength. It means reaching out to her mentor when she's uncertain about a leadership decision. It means prioritizing time with friends who energize rather than drain her. These connections provide both emotional support and perspective when negative thinking threatens to take hold. Lastly, resilience requires practice. Just as physical strength develops through consistent exercise, emotional resilience grows through intentionally facing and working through challenges. Each time we successfully navigate a difficulty, even a small one, we build confidence in our capacity to handle future challenges. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, the art of living is more like wrestling than dancing. You must be ready and steady to meet sudden attacks. This metaphor captures the nature of resilience, not a performance where all moves are choreographed, but a responsive capability developed through practice and experience. 6 months after her moment of recognition in the car, Alicia hasn't eliminated the challenges in her work. The healthcare system is still strained and difficult days still occur. But she's developed a toolkit for navigating these challenges, focusing on what she can control, reframing setbacks as opportunities for growth, practicing self-compassion and mindfulness, leaning on her support network, and building resilience through daily practice. The next time you face adversity, remember that resilience isn't about avoiding pain or pretending everything is fine. It's about developing the inner resources to face challenges directly while maintaining your core strength and sense of self. By cultivating this capacity, you create a foundation that negative thinking cannot easily shake, a foundation from which you can face life's inevitable difficulties with courage, wisdom, and an unbreakable spirit. Lesson 8. The Gratitude Advantage, Shifting Your Focus. Michael Reeves, 47, sits in gridlock traffic on Chicago's Kennedy Expressway, his knuckles white as he grips the steering wheel. It's Tuesday morning, 8:37 a.m., and he's already 22 minutes late for an important client meeting downtown. His blood pressure rises with each passing minute as the sea of brake lights extends to the horizon. Inside his mind, a familiar narrative unfolds. This is ridiculous. I'm never going to make it. The client will think I'm unprofessional. Why does this always happen to me? This whole day is ruined before it even starts. Michael's experience is universal. When life doesn't meet our expectations, our minds naturally gravitate toward what's wrong, what's missing, or what could be better. This negativity bias is hardwired into our psychology. Our brains are Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive ones. It's an evolutionary adaptation that helped our ancestors survive by staying alert to threats, but in modern life, it often creates unnecessary suffering. Gratitude offers a powerful antidote to this natural tendency. It's not just a pleasant emotion or polite gesture, it's a deliberate practice that shifts your attention from what's lacking to what's already present. In doing so, it fundamentally alters your experience of reality without changing a single external circumstance. Marcus Aurelius understood this when he wrote, "Do not indulge in dreams of having what you have not, but reckon up the chief of the blessings you do possess, and then thankfully remember how you would crave them if they were not yours." This wisdom reminds us that much of our unhappiness comes from taking for granted what we already have while fixating on what we lack. For Michael in traffic, practicing gratitude doesn't mean pretending he's not late or that being late doesn't matter. It means expanding his awareness beyond this single frustrating circumstance to include the fuller context of his life. While still acknowledging the reality of the traffic jam, he might recognize that he has reliable transportation, a job he values enough to care about being punctual, and a phone to call ahead and manage expectations with his client. This shift isn't about forcing positivity, it's about completeness of perspective. Negative thinking thrives on narrow focus, zooming in exclusively on what's wrong while filtering out everything else. Gratitude